This picture behind me is called Nature Through the Glass of Time, and it gives the exhibition its title, and it really encapsulates, I think, what I'm interested in as a painter, and that is trying to express these various dimensions of time and space in the landscape. So this painting here is really about the fleeting time that you have when you watch clouds, if we could call it meteorological time. And I'm also interested in these much longer spans of time, of geological time. So this painting here is really about the geology of Melbourne. When I moved to Melbourne and started painting from a studio in Richmond, I became fascinated by the idea that the whole of Melbourne sits on this kind of geological underpinning of volcanic rock. And at various places you can actually see this kind of coming up through the surface of the earth. This is Merry Creek, and as you look down into Merry Creek, you can see these columns of basalt underneath this oval here, which is a park at Northcote. What I wanted to try and do was to get this sense that it was really volcanic activity that had created this landscape. And then there's the much more kind of recent landscape of trees and parklands that overlay that underworld, if you like. It's a picture of the Victorian underworld. So one of the things that I enjoy doing in my paintings is to look at the works of some of the old master painters that I have long admired and looked at. And of course in Melbourne we've got a fantastic opportunity to look at these paintings at the National Gallery Victoria. And the great 17th century French artist Poussin painted the crossing of the Red Sea, and that painting's now in the National Gallery Victoria. And I've used an idea in that painting of these big clouds that look like kind of the paws of big Thurber dogs coming over the horizon. And I've put that together with something that I actually saw on the south coast of New South Wales, a storm coming over the sea and a cliff. And I thought, actually I can bring together those two ideas in this picture. The colour really is quite non-naturalistic, and it has a sort of heightened sense of mood, which is something that I try to convey in these larger oils, and that's quite different from what I do in the more informal gouaches, which are done directly from the spot. Lots of the paintings that I've made over the past couple of years are based on the south coast of New South Wales landscape, which to me is endlessly fascinating. And one of my really favourite spots is where you have Goolaga Mountain coming down to the sea, and then off the coast, Montague Island. And they all have a connected geology. But in this painting, I just wanted to get a sense of the space that one feels looking at an island offshore. And as soon as I painted this cloud over this very warm ground and put the sea in, I thought, that's exactly what I want to say. That's enough. That's the complete picture. Montague Island is a fabulous environment. There are New Zealand fur seals, there are Australian fur seals, there are shearwaters nesting there. And right in the middle there's this fantastic lighthouse that was built in the 1880s from the granite that was quarried on the island. I've merely suggested that with a little scrape in the paint, but the picture really is about that sense of space you get when you look at the horizon and an island offshore. I'm fascinated by blue bottles washed up on the beach and mostly in New South Wales, and I think it's a childhood memory for most people, is going to the beach and trying to avoid being stung by blue bottles. But they are fascinating creatures, and when they're newly washed onto the beach they kind of create this marvellous calligraphy. And the colour in the sun is iridescent, and for a painter it's a great challenge to try and capture that sense of fragility and beauty of colour before they get tumbled into the sand. In this picture here I've put together really the fragility of the life cycle of the blue bottle and contrasted that with a piece of geological time. It's actually a piece of rock from a headland, and it had been covered with moss and then just broken off and fallen onto the beach, and I picked it up and thought, that is a world in itself. One of the things that fascinates me is this idea that a rock can be an entire landscape and can encapsulate an entire world. In this exhibition there are some geological specimens and rocks that I've painted that are 300 million years old, and I'm fascinated too by much more recent phenomena. These gouaches here are pieces of pumice washed onto the beach after the eruption of an underwater volcano in 2012. So walking along the beach in 2013, at the end of the year, I noticed that the beaches were strewn with these fascinating chunks of pumice, and investigated it a bit further and found that they had been washed from this underwater volcano off the coast of New Zealand, washed right across the Tasman Sea and ended up in the south coast of New South Wales. And in a way they create these landscapes. I almost see here a headland created of these pieces of pumice, and they're wonderful and fascinating to paint. What I tried to do is to get this sense that this is a rock that is incredibly light and floats, and yet it has a weight, and they have all of these wonderful little kind of bubbles and interstices, and little creatures build their homes on them like a raft. Really fascinating, and they're all breaking down now and turning back into sand. So that's a moment in time captured by the artist. So this picture is called The Stone of Melbourne, and it's sort of a bit of a joke on John Ruskin's book, The Stones of Venice. And really, I thought, well, what could be more Melbourne than the ubiquitous bluestone? And this is a rough-hewn piece of bluestone, and What I love about it is it's got this sense of a landscape within it. You can see clouds, you can see a horizon, and this sense of warmth comes through, and somehow seems to suggest the way in which this basalt was originally formed. And this was a piece of rock I just picked up just outside my studio in Burnley, and again it's full of this life which suggests its formation, and it creates a landscape space. So really it's trying to bring together two sorts of landscape into really a still life. So again, the idea is that a still life can encapsulate an entire world. When you paint still lifes of rocks, what happens is that your friends give you them. And sometimes they give you really fascinating things. A fellow artist of mine gave me this piece of amber that he picked up in Denmark on the beach in 1967. And I couldn't resist painting it because it's got such a beautiful, beautiful texture. And it's a piece of fossilized resin that's come from the bottom of the Baltic Sea and being washed up on the beach, and has a beautiful waxy patina and a wonderful orange glow. It's not the only rock that a friend has given me recently. A friend brought this rock back from the Simpson Desert for me. It's a tektite, a tiny fragment of rock that's been thrown high into the atmosphere by the collision of an asteroid with Earth thousands of years ago. And these tiny fragments of rock melt as they come back into the atmosphere and end up having a very particular kind of feel and texture. They're like little pieces of molten glass. And they often, as they fall to earth, create these wonderful shapes. The museum here in Victoria has a fantastic collection of these tektites, and lots of them have been found around Port Campbell, and there are lots of them you can find, if you know what you're looking for, in the stony deserts of Central Australia. And they can be pretty hard to detect, but I was very happy to receive this, wrapped in tissue paper and lovingly brought back by a desert explorer for me to paint. And in this picture I put it together with an old tin can that I picked up in the desert about 8 years ago, and a little reference to an old master painting of Elijah in the desert. So it's really a desert picture, all in the framework of this small still life. I've long been fascinated by this idea that a still life can really talk about things that are much bigger in the world than just what's in the picture. Traditionally, still life has done that, and lots of the still life paintings by the old masters talk about the passing of time and mortality and so on. I painted these little pictures of tube stock plants back in the mid-1990s when I had very little time to paint. But I was fascinated by these plants brought to plant in the garden, really, with their little markings of barcodes and their labels and these little sort of plastic things that are there to identify the species. And I've tried to suggest in them that really these these specimens have this kind of massive potential to become something else, and they fit into a whole sort of framework of gardening and commercialization and taming of nature, and all of those ideas I tried to encapsulate in these paintings. At this time I was painting in a very kind of precise style, trying to be as precise as possible. In a way, I guess I was thinking a little bit about botanical illustration, and my more recent work tends to be much more free-flowing and impressionistic and suggestive in the depiction of foliage. In the late 1980s, when I was working in Canberra and had a young family, we moved to a farmhouse about 50 kilometres out of town, and there I had a little studio but very little time to paint, and I was fascinated to find a big stack of old weatherboards that had been taken from a shed, and as I looked at them I could see landscapes within them, and I made this series of paintings with an awful lot of help from the timber itself, suggesting a river. I didn't have to do very much to get this sense of a river with the dense foliage of the bush behind. At the time I was thinking of Joseph Conrad's book Heart of Darkness, with the little boat going up the river, and images like a gunboat off the coast just firing into the jungle, and somehow my mood at the time gave me to really try to express this kind of feeling of really the greyness of the bush as you look into it. And again, these are really landscapes of a coastal place, even though they were painted just outside of Canberra. I love painting in the desert. The sense of space is a fantastic challenge for a painter. I love rocky places, so the desert that I like particularly is the Gibber Plains in South Australia and Sturt's Stony Desert. It's great painting out in the desert with gouache. You've got to do it before the paint actually dries on the palette or on the paper, and the light changes so rapidly, particularly towards the end of the day. It becomes a real race against time. But in these works, in the exhibition, I've tried to suggest something of the sense of space and that feeling you get when you're in the desert, that the sky is not just a continuous background, but is like a massive sort of dome, and against that light you have all sorts of plays of shadow and tone. So I could very happily be dumped in the middle of a Gibber plain for a few hours with some paper and some paints, and I'm in my element. So in the exhibition there are really three types of works. There are studio-based still life paintings, there are larger paintings based on landscapes, and then there are gouaches, all of them painted actually on the spot. The challenge of taking a sheet of paper into nature and capturing something of a place and a mood is to me a wonderfully exhilarating challenge as a painter. The gouaches are intended to create a sense of a space that you could walk around in, that you could inhabit. So there's a lot of, often a lot of white paper, a lot of things that are imagined rather than stated directly. but so long as they have that feel of energy and space and life and light, I'm happy with the result. Sometimes the gouaches end up not working because a rain cloud will come over and wash it away. That's happened to be on lots of occasions. Or on other occasions the light changes so rapidly that it's impossible to capture a moment. But sometimes happy things happen. On one occasion I was walking back to the car having been painting on a headland, and the car was parked just near the Tilba cemetery, and behind the cemetery was this wonderful cloud worthy of being from a Dutch 17th century landscape. And I thought, I must capture this moment. I dropped everything and mixed some paint, and I had a sheet of paper left, and I was very pleased with the result, to capture what is really quite a remarkable little pocket of the South Coast landscape. This painting is called Silver and Gold, and it's really suggested by the title of the book on which these rocks are sitting. They're gold-bearing quartz, so in a way they encapsulate some of the history of Victoria. So really, in some ways, this exhibition is really encapsulated. All of the themes and all of the ideas come together in this picture. It has geology, it has landscape, it has embedded history. And I was really very happy when I painted this work to have suggested, I think, a landscape, and the landscape from which these rocks came. And I put it together with a frame because I wanted to suggest a gold frame, gold coming from this quartz. And I noticed when I put the frame against the wall that there was a picture wire which has created a beautiful central Victorian hilly landscape in the background. So in a way, this painting, I think, sums up all of the things that have fascinated me in putting together these works over the past 2 years.